Welcome back to Story Deep Dive with Dana and Rachel. This is a podcast with book coaches and editors, and we are besties in real life, okay? For real, for real. What we do here is we read stories, but not as readers, as writers. And so you get our takes. We draw in inspiration, our notes, and our insights as editors, while we have a lot of laughs and a great time along the way. And so in this discussion, this is our final discussion when it comes to our current reading selection, which is K.F. Breene's Sin and Chocolate. Now, I must say, I don't think the title sort of really aligns with the book.
Yeah.
But whatever. She didn't ask me. I mean,
yeah,
I don't think
chocolate
so,
didn't come up a whole lot. Like, it wasn't like a major theme. We got it a couple times of like a good chocolate, and I was like, okay. I was waiting for him to be like a chocolatier or something. I don't know. Like, he's just some hot guy. Not even a hot chocolatier, just some dude.
Nothing. Girl, listen, yeah, she said a couple times. I guess she had to throw it in there just in case. Maybe she came up and was like, oh, this title was hot. And then she just rolled with it. So with that said, we will be discussing our editor's takes for Sin and Chocolate and some of the things that we've sort of been talking about behind the scenes and what we are taking away from this. And we think that will be great starting points if you want to attempt something so audacious as a book like this. But before we get into that, Rachel, what do you have going on over there at Story Cipher?
Well, at Story Cipher, we're always doing all things crime and fantasy, which means that on this podcast, you get pulled along for the ride. So while I am reading those nasty books where they're swinging from the chandeliers, I am giving to you a healthy dose of murder and magic. So I want to talk a little bit about our next book that we're doing on the podcast, which I am super, super excited about. I read this for the first time, I think it was last year. And it was just such like a fun, like classic mystery. So our next book for next month is going to be The Woman in the Library by Sulari Gentle. This book is a classic murder mystery with sort of this closed room style murder mystery with a really narrow a narrow cast of suspects specifically. And it is such a good example of like a fair play murder mystery where we know who the suspects are. It is like she plays fair and square with her clues, but also the protagonist is a writer, and writers and readers love books about writers and readers. Like when the protagonist is someone like us, we are like, ooh, I love it so much. And she also, I'm really excited to talk about, she has this really interesting narrative device that she uses that I've never seen before, but it's really, it's unusual, and it just adds so much, it just adds extra goodness to the story. So that's going to be our October book pick. So a murder mystery is like the perfect thing for an October book pick. And I am looking so dang forward to sharing it with all of you who are listening and watching, and with you, Dana, who is going to be subjected to all of my book tastes. So I love this for you because it's going to be so fun. And there's even a little bit of romance in there.
Listen, you are so excited, and that always makes me so concerned. Listen.
She's excited. I am worried. Then again, I was that excited about Ninth House, and you're like, why are there ghosts and people dying? What's happening?
Girl, you didn't tell me we're going to be some ghosts up in here. Listen. Okay, one of the pacts that Rachel and I have regarding this reading journey together is that I'm going to try my absolute best to not be like the two-year-old who is having a tantrum about having to eat their vegetables. Because while I'm actually reading it, y'all, she gets all the text, all the attitude. And then when I get to the end, I'm like, I see why you picked it. And she's just like, for real, you just did all of it.
The sassy polos of like, what is this? And then by the end being like, this was deep. And I'm like, I know!
I was like, why? Does she not know me? Does she not know my type of reading? I'd be like, Lord, I gotta focus. Okay, all right, I got it. I got it.
I can say this has the benefit because, like, the first book out of the gate we did was Ninth House, which is like 550 pages, intense. Our story opens with cracking a dude open, which is like, oh, it's so good. But it's so like tonally so powerful and so evocative. And then we did The Whistleblower not long after, which is like dense, like prose and British politics. This one is actually like, like, it for me borders on like a cozy mystery. Like it's kind of much tonally lighter. It's a much like overall like lighter read. So it's not going to be as like gritty. It's not going to be as like intense as The Whistleblower or Ninth House. So I say that in defense of myself and in defense of this book of like, I think it's a very fun read. It's a very light, enjoyable read. So
Y'all, for the record, I don't trust Rachel saying this is a fun read.
Dana doesn't look like she believes me. If you're not watching the podcast, I will just report back that Dana's looking at me like, she's not buying it. Your sense of fun and my sense of fun. That's fair.
Listen,
my sense of fun involves an awful lot of death. I don't know.
Listen, when you get excited, I just know that you're excited. And I try my absolute best to bring the same energy. That's all.
I think it's a noble effort that you make, and I appreciate that we are working and meeting each other in the middle with our book picks here. And I'm like, right. This is what we're doing. All right. And It gets crazy and it gets hot and our clothes are gone. And I'm like, okay, I guess this is what we're doing.
And this is why I tell you still pick your books. Don't listen to me like over here like, oh Lord, clutches pearls. Okay? Just let it be, because if you look at it, our choices have really gone well together this year.
Yeah, they really have.
And it was like, which I guess since we did it the way that we did, I mean, we could say we're just geniuses. I mean, we could say that. But
okay
the other part,
I
bet you are. I bet you are. It's a yes for me. But I think also the way that we wove them together, and it just shows like the dynamics of what we like to read. I think it's going to be so interesting. Hey, and as we're saying this, y'all, if you are watching or listening to this, don't forget to drop some of your recommendations.
Please.
Because we are finalizing our 2026 reading list, and hopefully we get some book twos in there.
Yeah.
Of what we read from this year and some other things, and maybe even some more current things. So who knows? Or Rachel maybe pull us up one that we gotta get some dust off of.
I try not to do too many of the dusty books, particularly. So I love the classics. I love them for their contribution to literature. I love them for establishing the history of a given genre. But I will say, because they tend to operate stylistically differently, they don't tend to have like the same tight plot structures that we're used to in modern fiction, right? And so those are things that, like, when I'm working with my clients and we are working on their book, I very seldom pull out a classic, because what they need to see are, comps for their books right now, because the classics are good for building your understanding of the genre overall, and I love them for all of the reasons that they are like classics. But you, particularly with like plot and it's really plot more than anything. Our like modern stories are much more like concisely plot driven than stories were in the past, and so it can be hard to bridge that gap if you're not already interested in like, how did this genre develop and where did it come from and who are the key players who made it what it is and all of that kind of stuff. So for the most part, I don't think I will have any dusty books coming up, but we may be doing Hellbent, which I think would be super fun, and it's such a good book.
Listen, I'm not even gonna if we do, we do. I will say this: I'm not a huge classic reader, besides when I'm forced to do it. However, I can appreciate something that's a little aged, right?
Yeah.
And that's a part of our process. We call it looking for your OG, right? Your GOAT in your genre, because what it does is, even if it doesn't align with the structure and or the full pacing the way that we would do now, especially for indie. It does establish a great tone and rhythm.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not the exact same, but it does do a great job of creating the container.
Yeah.
If you will. And so I can appreciate that, y'all. So I'm not going to go as far as to say that I will reach for a classic. However, I will say that I can appreciate it. That's all I can say.
Come on. Well, and we talked a little bit about last week or the week before, I don't remember, but about like this book, Sin and Chocolate, being one of those good genre establishing books that's like really kind of like, it is sort of one of those container books for romantic fantasy. And that's kind of how you thought about this one. Because this one came out, this book came out before, so romantic fantasy has been around for at least a little while, before it sort of became romantasy as we know it now, or like as sort of like the book talk trend that it is. And this came out before like romantasy was the thing that it is now.
Yeah, I have so many theories on this. Like I can talk about it forever, and I don't say that I'm like, I would say I'm probably a lot more comfortable when it comes to just regular contemporary romance. Of course, paranormal. I would still put that in there just because it's a lot more secure. Romantasy is something that I really, until I kind of hooked into, at least for myself, it was helpful, that it really was just an overflow of urban fantasy, right? Like urban fantasy was very, very popular.
Yeah.
If you would think about it in like the late 90s, early 2000s, that it was very popular, urban fantasy was. And then it kind of is like people started pulling in the romance because romance, and I personally, listen, y'all say whatever you want to say, I personally believe that has to do with Kindle Unlimited.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh,
because when you have Kindle Unlimited and you have so many romance readers that drive that subscription, then if you have any of those other genres and you want eyes and you want people to sort of be voracious about your read, why not? Right? I just think y'all have other thoughts about how to do that. But, bringing in the romance. And I don't think that was the first time that we had a romantic fantasy.
Yeah.
But I think it was the first time that we had stories that were intentionally dual genres on purpose.
Yeah.
Right? And that it was sort of woven in and you cannot remove one or the other, or you would just dismantle the story. And I think that's the thing. So by the time you take the thing, social media and TikTok and book talk, it just sort of poured gasoline on it because I think it was a great introduction. Now, what happens is it's very interesting to see people transition from those romantasies or those gateway romantasies, right, into the actual genre books. And you can look back and be like, okay, well, it was good, but maybe not as good as this.
Yeah.
And that's usually because the others are a lot more structurally sound. And maybe it's also because they were charting new territory and you are sort of mixing two genres while at the same time trying to figure out how to get that palette and how to get those seasonings and everything right to make it not just palatable but desired. And so I could talk about that forever, but as someone who loves to study that's how I stumbled on this book, and that's how I stumbled on K.F. Breene, because I am not naturally a fantasy reader. I would read African American romance and a couple of others sprinkled in all day, every day. But I was going on this journey of reading, and I think I even put another one of my romantasy ones on our list for next year, but of reading some of those romantasy books that keep coming up and that I'm, again, calling them gateway romantasy books. They seem to be very a low barrier of entry where you don't have to have a lot of understanding. And sometimes people are almost shocked by the romance, but not realizing that that's the nature of romance because they're not romance readers. Right. And then they almost tend to sometimes start a little bit younger in the age category. So you can get a little bit longer or almost, if you will, like a coming of age sort of bumps up against that. And so it's interesting to see how it's all evolved. And this was one series or one book that when I finished reading it, I immediately could have easily read it again.
Yeah.
Like, I've read it so many times just for myself. And it was a very interesting contrast to one of her other books. Because at first I was like, wait, do I like this because I like the way she writes? Or is it that I like the content and I like, all the other things? And then I read another one of her books, and I did like her writing style, but I didn't really care for that book. But I liked the book, but I didn't love the book for some key reasons. And so this was also one of those stories where I feel like it gives us like a little bit of an aroma of what we were talking about with Beautifully Cruel. Again, just a test to like how we set these books up, because these two coming together is very interesting.
Yeah.
But kind of like what we're talking about with Beautifully Cruel, of like, kind of felt like she was playing with something and trying to see what she had. And I feel like there are some aspects of this story that feels like that, but not executed in the same way. And it may be the difference in where she was as a writer. I don't know much about this author. It could also just be that she had written enough books and she like let this series marinate enough that she really executed it in a way that made it very it made it really solid. And I feel like it makes it almost like a genre agnostic. Is that the right way I think of to say it?
Yeah.
Of like anybody could read this book, especially this book one, right? The magic is not too much. The steam is not too much. All of it makes you curious. You could be someone who is a fan of suspense or mystery. Maybe not so much in book one, but as you move forward, maybe. And I think you could pull romance and fantasy readers or romantic fantasy readers equally with this book, because the otherness of it is not so over the top, and that it is tastefully, if you will, done. And so, so it was one of the reasons why I recommended it to you, and I felt like it is a great read. And I think it's also a great sort of read if you are someone who you may want to play in this area and you're not quite sure yet, like what it could look like if you did it. Because a lot of like paranormal is more focused on werewolves and shapeshifters. And this is one that the way that this book is set up, book two could go anywhere. It could be almost any species, which lends itself to the fantasy aspect of it. The fact that they're demigods and they're not things like werewolves and vampires, which are the majority of a lot of those books, means that you really do open up the space of what you can do in a book two, as long as you hook readers with the book one, which is something that I think she again done really well. So it's just those are all the reasons and then some. But on the top of the fact that I just think they're hot. And she did it well. So but yeah, definitely.
I just wanted, so I was looking for because I remember this was like ages ago, but I had been getting, like, Audible had been advertising to me a KF Breene book, because it was like, you like fantasy? And then it was just like, the algorithm just kind of throws all kinds of stuff at you, like, what about this? What about this? What about this? And there was this KF Breene book that I kept getting recommended to me. I can't find it on Audible, but but it was an adventure fantasy that was a romance. And so I think one of the reasons that this book turned out so well is because I think that she had gotten a few reps in before this of like this type of story. Because I remember, it had super like alpha male, like love interest, and the girl, she was like she was warrior or something, like she was super like strong female character, and they're kind of facing down, I think, some kind of world ending antagonist.
I think that's the one that I read.
It could be. It was, I think that it's older than Sin and Chocolate. And I just, for the life of me, I can't find it. And I can't remember the title, because I just never, when I saw that it was a romance at the time, I was like, oh, this isn't the kind of thing that I'm looking for. Because at the time I wasn't looking for romances.
And look at you now.
Look at me now. Look, we have got more romance coming down the pipeline.
But I get it. Like here's the thing. And this almost, we'll go into our summary in just a second too, but I would say there's an aspect of this that if you go into this dynamic of looking at a romantasy or looking at a romantic fantasy, then you almost have to decide, like, what are the elements of fantasy that really draw you as a reader, right? Because some of them are purely character driven. So if they're character driven and then those fantasy aspects are sort of sprinkled in, and the author knows how to temper them in just the way, that means you could be a romance reader or a fantasy reader and you can enjoy it. But there are others where they really lean more towards the fantasy side, in that it is a little bit more world building, that there's a little bit more understanding of what's the circumstances in which they're in. And it doesn't mean the other ones don't do that, but it don't pay it a whole lot of, like, we get enough to make the core elements of the story stick. But we don't get I don't want to say overkill, but I mean, you don't just get the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I believe Breene does run that spectrum in her romances. And so she does do things, but she also does a very great job of playing well with traditionally romance tropes, and a lot of retellings that I've read of hers that she's done a really great job in. So I think that's, if I were to, like, I've never met her and I've never interviewed her, but hey, girl, if you listening, if you are, because KF could be anything, but basically I was saying, if you are, holla at your girl. And so, but what I think is, it's almost like, as an author, and I say this a lot to my clients, especially ones in inner circle, that you sort of have to decide, like, what are those sort of levers that I have at my disposal that are in alignment with my brand that I intend to pull and I intend to activate, and the ones that you want people to automatically associate with your brand. So that whether you go hardcore or you go light or you go soft or you go hard, they're still there for you, because they know that this is your brand promise. And in this particular space, I think it's important because even though it's a popular word, it's not very concrete as far as what those aspects are, other than, for the most part, it does align squarely with romance structure. And so with that said, that means every time you find a new one, you sort of are like a little bit in the Wild Wild West. So you read a little bit and you're like, oh, okay, I see what they're doing here,
Yeah.
And so but I think it also makes it so it's, at the same time, it's very, you have a lot of room for growth and improving and sort of doing your own thing, while still appealing to those readers that would be well readers, right? That they read a lot of books. So, I mean, I think it's an open space right now, but yeah. Definitely.
I managed to find the book. It was called Chosen, and she published it in 2014. And so, I went, because I was like, I know what the cover looks like. I just need to find the title. But it's we've got sexy alpha male, we've got strong female lead, we have like dramatic, almost like, it actually reminds me of the kinds of romantasy stories we're seeing now, which is kind of nuts to see K.F. Breene doing it back in 2014. But what that means is, by the time we get to Sin and Chocolate, she's done this a few times, right? Like, she's kind of gotten some of those reps in, because I think that Sin and Chocolate came out in maybe 2017 it was 2017 or 2019, somewhere about.
But this one, square, like, y'all, I'm looking at the cover. We're both looking at the cover. So if you didn't, go check it out on Amazon. But this totally looks like urban fantasy.
Yeah.
It's really urban fantasy. And listen, baby, what she said is, I know how to adapt with the times. Don't play with me. That's what she's saying.
She knows how to write to market, how to catch the trends and get in there.
And get in there and do what she needs to do, and then slide on to the side. And I mean, I need to take a look at it just to see. But yeah, I think, and here's the last part of this before we really get into our true discussion. I think it's so important to do your market research.
Yeah.
You've got to do your market research, because if you really did when I sat down and did the market research on this, and I honestly did it most of my in-depth research that's not in my own books is because of clients, right? Working with the client. And when I started digging, I was like, wait a minute, this came from urban fantasy. Now, this now no book is going to say, well, this came from urban fantasy.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes people now will report, and y'all done heard it here. So if you heard it here, go ahead, snap it up. But once I saw that, I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense, right? And so it then becomes this sort of dynamic of a recipe, if you will, right? A recipe of what are those elements for you? Are you really about being character driven? Are you really about the world? Are you wanting to have a tight cast? Are you wanting to have a cast that you can grow into, do spinoffs on? Do you want to do standoffs? Do you want to do series? Do you want to do trilogies? You know, do you want to create one world and have all of the books that you write under the umbrella of that world? And so that your readers are sort of just getting a little bit more knowledge into your world as they continue to read. And the great thing is you don't have to make all of those decisions at once, but you do want to make them. Yeah. Right. To be able to ground yourself and root yourself enough.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, that was our small talk for today. We just went all around the kind of like a little bit of romance history. Hell yeah.
But it aligns. But we promise. Go ahead. Oh, well. So what we're going to do now is go into the summary real quick before we get into the topics for our wrap up and our editor's takes. And listen, if you did not take notes on some of that, what are you doing with your life? Because that is going to pull right in.
You already got some takeaways. Okay.
Come on, and some tea. All right. And so you want to take that and you want to bring that forward, because a lot of that spills over into what we're looking at in the editor's takes. Because if you're saying, I want to write a story like this, it's hard to write a story like this if you have no idea of where it came from. It's kind of like Rachel and the classics. I just got to take her word for it. You know what I'm saying?
So I do the research so my clients can read their comps, and then I can talk them through, here's where it came from, here's why it, like I take that job upon myself of like, if you want to go and dig into this, you can, but you need to be looking at your comps. Let me tell you how we got here.
And I just make up for that in volume. Okay. I just read a lot of books. I read a lot of books, a lot. But you want to know that, and you want to be able to, the more that you can have a sort of through line to the source, or some of the most original books that made the current version of what you are sort of conceptualizing possible and or popular, then you're onto something. Yeah. And so that's what all of this is about. And it can be on a lot of those factors. And sometimes, like Romantasy, it's just the merging. It's the merging of two sort of worlds. Yeah. And a couple of authors just doubling down on it and making it work, and then making it sexy. Yeah. Right. And then we love it. So with that said, go ahead and give us a brief summary before we get into the rest of our discussion.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, K.F. Breene's Sin and Chocolate is the first book in the Demigods of San Francisco series, an urban fantasy romance that blends gritty survival, found family, and a broody demigod love interest. The story follows Alexis, a woman scraping by in San Francisco's neutral magical zone while protecting her two wards, Daisy and Mordecai. Her life changes when she crosses paths with Kieran, the sinfully powerful son of a ruthless demigod ruler, and Lexi has a rare power he's been looking for to save his mother. The book delivers slow-burn romance, high-stakes magic, sharp humor, and deep emotional bonds, all while setting up a series-long couple whose relationship unfolds across 6 books. I focused up super hard because last time I had to read the summary, I got all tripped up, and I specifically went, broody demigod love interest, and I was like, you can't do it again, Rachel, you've already done it, you can't do it again, but it was stuck in my head because that's how I did it last time. So anyway, that's the summary.
You are so extra. You gotta love it. You gotta love it. Okay. Before you get off of your broody love interest, go ahead and give us, if you will, the high version of some of the things you'd like to discuss before we talk about our editor's takes to close out this read.
Yeah. So just to kind of hit some of the overarching things I want to look at, I want to talk about giving your protagonist a goal and why that's important and what it does for the story and what that does for the protagonist. also talking about, bringing your overarching force of antagonism. If you're in a series, kind of bringing that force of antagonism into book one, and how to kind of introduce them and get them involved so that we can kind of feel something's coming, even if we don't know the details, and we will learn the details over the course of a book. And then also using the plot to showcase the magic. This is going to be applicable. Even though this is a romantic fantasy, this is something that your romantic fantasy, writers you want to do, and your epic fantasy writers, your urban all of that. If you're writing fantasy, this matters. But before we get into any of my takeaways, I had a question that I kind of wanted to pose to you that we've been talking around the last few episodes, but I would love to get your insights on creating a multi-book series that features the same couple. So we've read up until this point romances that feature one couple in one book. So by the end, our couple is together. So we get all the steam, we get all the things, and then boop, and then the book's over. But then when you're looking at a multi-book series and you've got the same couple, the way you pace that out obviously has to change. You can't give everybody everything up front, but you need to give them some, or you at least have to make the promise. And so I wondered if you could talk just about tips for creating a multi-book series that features the same couple, and then maybe particularly emphasizing a first book and what kinds of things you're looking for. It's a tall order. I basically was just solve everybody's problems. Go.
You know what?
I've been lobbing these questions at you all, this whole series. I don't know what happened. I was just like, Dana, lend me your insights on this very complex topic. Go.
And you know what I'm going through over here. You know I'm on the struggle bus. She don't care I'm on the struggle bus. Okay. You know what? Okay, it is a tall ask, but I will say, just to back up so that it doesn't feel overwhelming, I think one of the things that I always ask clients to do is just pause for a second and as much as you can, identify how many books you want to have this couple to occupy. Normally the max that you would see is maybe 4. Mm-hmm. The fact that there are 6, that's not common.
Yeah.
And so I personally like it to break it down in a way that is almost very structurally sound, which is, starting to think about what is that overarching plot that is going to hold this series together.
Yeah.
What is the glue? Mm-hmm. And understanding what that is very important, because once you know that, then you could kind of begin to drop down into each book and say, okay, so what is the overarching plot? And if this is a romantic fantasy, back in the day it would have been considered an urban fantasy, but either way, I would say, what is that external plot? And then what does that romantic relationship look like over the course of the book? Mm-hmm. Because what's going to happen is their relationship is going to evolve in every single book. And once you understand what the overarching arc is, then you can begin to drop down in each book. And I like to ask, what does this one book represent to the entire arc?
Yeah.
Just to keep it real simple. We keep it cute, y'all. We keep it sexy and cute and simple. And then once you pull that down, then you can begin to explore it a little bit more, especially when you wrap that context around your main characters. So I guess the first thing that I would say is that you want to make sure that you honestly have characters that we care about and that we want to be on that journey with them. Okay. And understanding what that overarching plot will help us to understand, where are they when they begin, and where do you want them to be at the end, and how are they going to evolve? Because part of this, which she does great in this book, is that you've got to hook them. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to even ask an even taller order of you, hook them for all 6.
Yeah.
Don't play. Don't even go short. Don't do them for 1. Go for all 6. So how can you? And it's going to lead to one of the questions that you asked about earlier, which is the reason why you're beginning to hook us for 6 is because you're beginning to help us to understand and mount why Valance is such a formidable opponent.
Yeah.
He's not the opponent yet. We have his presence, but we start understanding of why they really don't want to mess with him.
Yeah.
And now, because we know they are, now we want to know what's going to happen, right? And so understanding where each one of those books sit. Now, what I would recommend when I'm working with clients is to begin to assign which books are in which act of the overarching structure, because you want each book to be whole and complete in themselves. Mm-hmm. and then you want this overarching story to work. Yeah. And that's like this is why, listen, don't do this out the gate. Get some books under your belt.
Yeah.
Don't give yourself this kind of headache. It's a good headache to have, but you really have to love the characters and the story to be stuck with it, or to be in this world for 6 books.
Yeah.
We didn't talk about the word count, but I would say in the ballpark, I don't know. I'm going to look at what the box said. The box said it says it's 2,500 words, right? So, I mean, this is a long series to be in this world with the same couple the whole time. So I would say making sure the overarching story is compelling, and that it is something that you can really give us the fullness of it across those 6 books. Yeah. And also really starting to get an understanding of where you're going to end and where you're going to start, so that you have room to increase the stakes every time. Another downside potentially, or a con of having 6 books, is every book you got to up the stakes.
Yep.
Well, you can't start book 1 down on the ground, or no one's going to get to book 6.
Yeah.
So you really have to have enough dynamics and enough moving parts at play that you can increase those stakes, while at the same time evolving this relationship, and while at the same time exposing us in this capacity to this world, and at the same time always having that sort of push-pull across the story. The other thing that I would say, as you start dropping down and seeing what each one of those books represent, I would also say, if you are in this case starting to do something like a slow burn, you're going to have to think about, what is the beginning, book ending of that relationship in book 1? Yep. What is it in book 2? What is it in book 3? What is it in book 4? That's why having 6 books seems like so much, right? Like, what is it? And even if you're not a plotter, and this is going to go out to my pantsers, I think having a mental note of this and bookending it, you don't have to be a plotter to know this. That's the stop sign.
Yeah.
This is where we end this book, so that you really can get the most of that ending, and you really can make the most of that beginning.
Yeah.
And so understanding where those elements fall. And then once you know that, I would say go all in on your main characters.
Yeah.
You want to know about every nook and cranny. Now, we are not talking about whether they like, avocado or guacamole on their burrito.
I appreciate that you're like, now hang on. What I just told you was this. What I don't mean is this. It's important, because sometimes you download those character sheets off the internet, and they're like, what's their favorite color? What do they have for breakfast? And you're like, man, that doesn't help me. Get out of here. Ugh.
Do they call it soda pop, or do they call it soda? No, what you really want to know is understanding, like, what is the deepest, darkest wound that would cause them to expose themselves to this journey. I had a better word, y'all, but I just have to give you the one I have. That will cause them to go on this journey and risk everything. For Kieran, he's risking something. He's risking a lot, and he's risking something that can be life or death for him. And by him doing it, he's also doing that for everyone that he cares about, which is the 6 in Alexis and Mordecai and Daisy. And so that means that it's got to be something good. It's got to be, you've got to go underneath there. And so the fact that we start off that this first book with the chapter 1 and chapter 2 already leaning into that, you begin to know, even though it's all going to unfold. So you really want to go in on those characters. What are those wounds? What are those lies that they tell themselves? Why these characters? Why now? Why her? Why him? What is it about them that is undeniable? What is the thing about them that will get in their way of reaching their goals? You want to know this, because at the end of the day, you're going to be with these people for 2,500 words or more, right? Or in the case of most books now, 600,000 words, being very conservative.
Like across all books?
That's right.
Yeah.
I would say anywhere between 80 and 100,000 nowadays.
Yeah.
Because a lot of these books are a little bit longer again. because they're appealing to Kindle Unlimited readers, and you're appealing to page reads, right? So with that said, you want to know that, and knowing that it's kind of like whenever you read a cozy, right, where they have little notches in their changes, right? In each book, you're sort of doing that, but with romance, you're going to have a little bit more. It's just that their personal journey is sort of slowly turning the dial towards 100% being all in, right?
Yeah.
And so, and once you know where your books fall in that sort of act structure, then you can begin to say, okay, here are books in book one. Now, here's how I built the entire story so that it is whole and complete on its own. And it also hints at what's to come, enough to get people invested to pre-order or buy the next one.
Yeah.
And I mean, that is probably just the very beginning, but if you can do that, you are ahead of the game.
Yeah, and the thing that I would just add too, and this is for because my fantasy writers are often writing trilogies. That's kind of fantasy kind of comes in trilogies a lot these days. I think the other thing is on the external plot side, if you know that there's an overarching antagonism in each book, you're going to want a concrete mission, essentially, right? A concrete. We are doing this thing. And that is bringing us closer to our confrontation with the antagonist, so that you have a clear structure for each book, and they can still sort of be self-contained. They're going to all be connected, but then you sort of are like, okay, we've hit this checkpoint, and then it gives rise to this next thing. And then we've hit this checkpoint, and it gives rise to this next thing. And it helps keep your plot focused on our way to our confrontation with our antagonism. So we're getting these again, they're sort of like miniature missions that are bringing us closer to the antagonist, that we're solving these problems so that we can keep the plot in each book nice and tight, and it doesn't, the series doesn't sag into a messy middle where the middle books are kind of muddled because we're trying to get from point A to point B, and then they get kind of messy and lost.
Yeah, but I would say yes, and it's the same for everybody, right? So even when I'm saying you're dropping down each book, it's because each book, the only way a book can be contained in itself is if you have a whole story.
Yeah.
It's a whole story of its own. Now, saying you have a mission, it might be a mission. Your book may not be a mission, but it should be some evolution.
Yes.
And it should be it's almost like a checkpoint where we can objectively see that has been satisfied. Because that's where sometimes with those cliffhangers that kind of get people. Now you can say, I want a hard cliffhanger between those books. And even when you have an hard cliffhanger, you can still make that work when you have a complete story, and that cliffhanger is the escalation of what they thought they completed. And it's like the old school infomercials, but wait, there's more, right? That's how you want your cliffhanger to be, so that you can't totally get away from people complaining about them, but that's the way that you can try to get around that as much as you can.
Yeah. Well, and I think that this is kind of a good, this dovetails a little bit into the conversation about this is like an overlap between getting us attached to that protagonist, right? Showcasing that protagonist. And then one of the things that this was before we started the call, but one of the things you wanted to talk about was that found family, right? And the way that the found family plays into the into making this book what it is. So do you want to, real quick, before I just go off on a tangent, do you want to say real quick what the high level stuff is that you want to hit as far as your takeaways are?
Okay. I would say, well, I don't know if I wanted to say anymore. We talked about this over the past episodes, but I will say this. There are times whenever you are writing something and I look at what are those reader-facing tropes that you are using to sort of pull people in, and it also sort of becomes like a glue for the story. And for this one, I do believe it's found family, right? Because for both of them, it is the thing that would cause them to do the thing they really don't want to do.
Yeah.
That they would do it for a loved one. Now that that brings on so many challenges for them, but it also covers a lot in a story that you need to do to endear those characters and to sort of get us to buy in to this story, which is it shows their humanity. It shows what they're willing to live for and die for. It shows them as being human, right? And it shows them something that either we aspire to or we can appreciate.
Yeah.
Right. And so that is really at the core of this, because both of them are sort of in this situation because of familial circumstances.
Yeah.
And they may have crossed paths at another time, but it would have been a little bit harder for them to sort of really work through that relationship, because they would have had nothing to really sort of cement them there and really force them to be in this space and put them in proximity with each other. And so here you see it in how we see it on a small scale with Lexi and Daisy and Mordecai, and it's something that grows across the series, but I think the actual essence of it is carried through. And I think it helps us to come into the fold, and you want to be a member of that found family. You want to be around that dinner table, right? Because you start getting these people. And I think it's a really great thing to root this in, because there's so much that's happening. There's the romance, there's the action, there's the mystery. But at the heart of it is just people who sort of are been outcast, who have been counted out, finding a place where they belong, period. Yeah. And so that's one of the things. And so I would say, as a takeaway from this one, this was a big moment, but I would say even for yourself, like you can have all types of tropes in a book. People, you may say only a few, you may end up having a million, trillion, whatever, but there may be a couple that sort of just roots everything.
Yeah.
And it grounds it. And that sort of that essence of that permeates everything. Your themes, how those characters evolve, how they become one. And not just in this case, two becoming one, but it's almost like his family and her family become a family, right? And I think that's also one of those things that really endears readers.
Yeah, and this is sort of like, this kind of connects into the takeaway that I wanted to highlight of like, one of the things that this book did so well, and that any writer can take from this book, and I feel like this feels like maybe like really common writing advice, but maybe it just is because it's so much easier said than done. But no matter what genre you're writing in, your protagonist should have some kind of goal. They should be in pursuit of something. And this found family, Lexi's wards, are what gives rise to that goal, right? Which is, I want to care for and protect my family. And so when we open the story, this is what she's trying to do. And the way that I teach kind of goal and like inciting incident in particular, so that it flows into the story itself. In general, your protagonist should have a goal prior to the inciting incident. They should be living their life toward something. And then that inciting incident, their goal should either get upended or transformed or complicated in some way by that inciting incident that, crosses their path with the story. So that goal stays relevant and it continues to be a drive of some kind, but it sort of directly collides with the inciting incident, so that they are colliding with the plot of the book and getting sucked into the story. And now they're kind of getting whisked into, cool, I'm involved in this now. Like I have to now I have to solve this problem relative to whatever that goal was. Again, it might completely change what their goal is. It might complicate what their goal is, might transform it altogether, whatever that thing is. But what that does is it means that pre-inciting incident, your protagonist has something to do that matters to the story, that can get us up to the inciting incident. And then it allows us to see who they actually are. So you don't have to narrate what they're like. You don't have to explain it to us, because we are literally watching it happen in story relevant ways. So it's not like, just seeing like, let me show you a slice out of their ordinary life. It's not... Okay, this is going to sound rude. I don't mean it rude. It's not that interesting, right? Like, it's because you've made us a promise, whether it's through the book blurb or the cover or whatever, you've made us a promise that we're going to have a story. So if we just get kind of like an irrelevant slice of life, you might get away with it, but you do yourself one better if you bring it into connection with the story itself, so that way we can actually see them like being themselves and demonstrating that character, and it motivates them to act throughout the story. So they're not just watching the world pass them by, where they are like, the protagonist is super boring and they're just a camera watching the cool events happen, and they're also not just sort of reacting to what's going on, but they are making active decisions in the story and affecting the way the story unfolds because of that motivation. And we understand why they're doing what they're doing because we see what that motivation is. And so that really, I think that K.F. Breene did this really well with Lexi, because she has one thing that she's after. That's protecting and caring for Daisy and Mordecai. And that drives everything that she does in the story. And we see it over and over and over again as she kind of keeps colliding with Kieran, and the way that Kieran complicates and transforms her ability to do that.
And we see it with Kieran too. Now, here's the thing too about this. Like, on one hand, you'd be like, okay, you could tell a story and tell any story that you want to tell. I mean, you're grown. I mean, most of you are grown. I mean, I hope you're grown if you're listening to this. But the other part of this, the flip side of that, is when you know that, it makes it so much easier to edit. Right? Because it gives you this like driving force, and it gives you this through line to keep your eye on. Because the same way that Alexis has a goal, Kieran has a goal too. And that's why we have the inciting incident, but the reality is they both disrupt each other's worlds.
Yeah.
And being clear on what that disruption is and how it disrupts it and what the fallout of that is what allows you to have a good, messy, juicy story, right? Because we love a good, messy, juicy story. And so knowing what that is and being able to identify it and to be able to clearly establish whether it is there or not as we move forward is how you can begin the process of making that baby shine. You know what I'm saying? And so, yes, definitely. Now, with that said, there was something else that we did want to point out, and that's really going back to some of the things that we talked about with our characters of Alexis and Kieran, and the antagonist, which is sort of off the page but present, which is Valens. And we kind of already said it, but it's just remembering that he's sort of coming up. He's there all the time. But I would say it's in a soft way, right? Because it's off the page.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's almost like, I'm gonna give y'all this example, and it may not be right, but I'm gonna go with it. I'm a goer. Okay. It's almost like when a woman thinks her man is cheating and she's collecting receipts. You know what I'm saying? She's collecting receipts.
I didn't know where you were about to go. I was like, I don't know where this potential metaphor is going, but I'm on the hook for it. I wasn't expecting that one, though.
Look, but she's here already. We on a hot line. So all the while, what you have this opportunity to do, because we see him early, but we don't see him with our eyes, if you will, is that you can begin to collect receipts. You could begin to help us to understand why he's a formidable opponent. You can help us to see why this adventure or this pursuit is really not opportune. And it helps us also to see, on the flip side, the type of people that they are.
Yeah.
And who they're turning into, and what do they value, and what do they cherish, and what do they protect, and how do they protect it, and are they willing to stand between the bad thing and the person that they love?
Yeah.
And that in itself that's the best way of showing who they are and showing how they evolve. So having him show up early means that every book we're learning a little bit more about why Kieran really shouldn't be doing this. And Lexi really shouldn't be in on it. Yeah. Lexi 10 toes down, and Kieran said, I don't care if it's all gonna burn, let it burn. Yeah. And we are here for all of it. A hook, line, and sinker. Yeah. But knowing that in the beginning helps us. And I think that's another one of those elements that pulls us in, not just for one book, but for the series. The final thing that I want to say about our two main characters on a high level, I really like the fact, and I think it's helpful to have Kieran is presented with an open wound. And most of the time when you are talking about your characters, they have a wound, but for many of them, it's not present. present.
Yeah.
Right? It's something that's more like an echo or something that taught them a lesson that they don't want to repeat. Right? But in this case, it's an open wound.
Yeah.
And it is something that is currently haunting him. So by the time you pair that with Alexis's urgent need, she can't wait much longer.
Yeah.
Her waiting any longer is really life or death for Mordecai.
Yeah.
So when you put those elements together, you already have us. And those elements were already present page 1.
Yep.
So I think that goes back to the question that you asked me earlier when you're thinking about a 6-book series. How can you get us in there? Get us in there right now. And people want to boom, bam, pow, do something that dead body, they don't got nothing to do with nothing or whatever. This is how you make it relevant. And this is how you really begin to show us what they're made of and whether we want to be a part of this story. And so, yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And well, I just want to say, like, this is also going back to what you're saying of, like, not just interesting us, like driving our interest through the events of the story, and the overarching force of antagonism in that sense of like, ooh, something big is lurking out there, we don't know what it is, but we know that we're on a collision course with it, but really like endearing us to those characters, right? Because we're watching them go after something at this point wherever they are in their journey. And we see them going after it. And then we see them colliding with each other, in their pursuit of that thing and getting sort of like, they constantly keep running into each other as they each want this thing. And it's almost like, that weird thing that happens when you're like walking down the sidewalk and someone's like on your path and you try to get out of the way and they try to get out of your way. So you go, oh, and then you sort of like do this number, It's like that right throughout the whole book where they're kind of like trying to like get out of the way until Kieran is like, he's following her now and he's like, no, wherever you're going, I'm headed there too, but then it invests us in the individuals themselves. So those characters, we care about them, we care about what they want, and we care about seeing them like succeed and seeing how the heck they're going to do that. And because there's also then this tension between Lexi and Kieran, we also want to see how all of that is going to play out now that, because in this book, we had cat and mouse. He was chasing her, and she was like, go away. Now they're stuck together, and we are like, oh boy, what's going to happen now that they have to work together? Because they, like, for each of them to get what they need, they have to work together. And that makes us ready for book 2, because it's, like, set up all of that tension, and now it's promising that there's going to be twice as much tension, because now they're shoved together in this mutual goal. And so I for one, can't wait to read book 2. I'm like, oh man, what's going to happen? I can't wait.
And I will say one of the things that I kind of have on my notes is like, you can't forget that this is technically, it's a complete book, but it's the end of Act 1. And so this is when I feel like it is so important to understand how acts work.
Yeah.
Whether you are 3 act, 4 act, 5 act, 10 act, I don't know how many acts there are, but whatever number. But if you're looking at a 4-act structure, this is I would say this is the end of Act 1.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we find here, even though in this individual unit, if you were only looking at book 1, you have a happy for now. You have the issue kind of shored up. And now what you're doing is you are just moving forward, but it also is the moving forward of the overarching arc. And so what we find is at the end that you have this sort of adhesion that has nothing to do with them, but everything to do with them. And what I mean by that is like, it's not, they don't want to be stuck with each other. He's curious, but he also knows that being around him is deadly.
Yeah.
Right. And he's starting to have enough feelings for her to know that he doesn't want her too close to the fire. And she doesn't want anything to do with him, but she knows if you get too close to that one, you're going to burn.
Yeah.
Right. But at the same time, they are stuck to each other because of things that are more important to them than their personal desires.
Yeah.
Right. Her to protect her wards, him, his mother. And so I think what happens is just like any really good Act 1, like it's almost like they're stuck together, but they're doing the kicking and screaming, but there's no way out of it.
Yeah.
Right. Going back doesn't meaning you always say like there's irrevocable. Yes, you could always do something different, but they're forever changed.
Yeah.
by having had this experience with each other. And so that's what we're seeing, you know. So it makes him, I say, it makes him smitten with her, and her very, very curious about who he is against what she probably perceives him to be based on his family. And so it makes for a very, very, very compelling read. So was there any other elements? I think we covered everything. Was there anything else you wanted to cover in this editor's takeaways?
You know, let me just drop one little bit about, world building, plot, and magic real quick, because it still fits into this kind of conversation about setting up for a series, right? Because when you're writing a series and you have a fantasy, this is true for historical fiction as well, urban fantasy, anything that is, world building. Honestly, this was even true for things we never got over, right? We're building Knockabout and investing us in wanting to spend more time there. And using your plot to showcase your setting so that we want to spend more time there as well, that we are interested. So, this story did such a great job of, again, the magical environment is directly tied into Lexi's problems, saving Mordecai, taking care of Mordecai, and his illness is magical in nature. The world is split into magical, non-magical, and then we have the weird gap in between, overseen by a demigod. So you've got all these different types of magic, and these things are prompting the problems that Lexi is trying to solve, and at times also providing the solutions to the problems that Lexi is trying to solve. And so the story itself, the events of the story themselves, are allowing us to see this world and how it functions and what it's like and what the magic is and what kinds of things magic can do. We've not even scratched the surface, but we've begun to see kind of how it works. And so we're curious and we want to see more. And so part of that first book in a series, or any book, even if it's a standalone, you want to invest the reader in your world, but you don't do that by telling them the cool stuff about your world, right? This is like, it's like, well, let me tell you about the cool magic, or let me tell you about the cool history of the world. No. I have no context for this. I believe you that it's cool, but if you just say so, I'm going to be like, I guess, because I don't have any framing for it. But when you show it to us through the plot, when we see it playing out in the events of the story, now we understand, we're interested in the magic because we watched it happen and we're like, ooh, that was cool and interesting. We see this, we actually witness the stakes playing out, right? Where we see like, oh, I could see where that could be dangerous, or I could see where that would be a problem. And then what it also means is that we start to remember more of the details of the world and understand how it functions because we've witnessed it happening. And so we're more likely to be interested and excited and invested in a world if we're not confused all the time. So we are seeing it happen. We're seeing how cause and effect works and what kinds of problems, and witnessing them through the plot so that now we understand, reasonably how the world works, and we want to see more. And this plot does that so well because, again, it's all directly integrated of our plot is caused by the world that she lives in and the type of magic that exists. And so it's bringing us directly into contact with it so that we understand it and we want to see more of it. And your plot is the key to doing that, to endearing your reader to your world and the world building that you've done. Your plot is where that happens. And this book is a great example of that.
It almost makes me think of, as you're saying that, and y'all listen, I think it's so amazing. One of the big takeaways of this whole process for me, is just like a lot of times we're doing things and we're working with stories in real time, and you're sort of having to sort of digest and figure out like, okay, what am I looking at? Okay, what recommendations do I need to make to this author? But when you are doing what we're doing now and you're continuing to read, hence why you're always hearing to read in your genre and read as much as possible, is because what it allows you to do is chew on that sort of thought. Because to me, one of the things that makes me think is if you're someone who is sort of a little bit not concrete in how you want your world building to be, whether you want it soft or hard magic or whatever, or whether you, or the capacity in which you want it to occupy in your story. You know, part of that may be getting through that first draft, so then you can begin to see when you pull back and you look at the scope of your story, then allowing yourself, because you know I'm a huge plotter. I'm gonna work that out in the plot, but most people that's not true.
Yeah.
And so being able to look at it, because what that's going to do is help you to identify what scenes can you turn up, or which ones can you remove, so you can get another opportunity to showcase this that will also pull the story forward. And I think it would help you to also make sure you do it in ways that feel not so forceful, but almost in a sense of curiosity.
Yeah.
To make us curious about the world and want to begin to start structuring what we see of that world in our own minds. And so as you begin to unfold more and more, we're building this world.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
And we want to see more of what's going on in it. And so I think that's a dope concept. Is there anything else that you want to add before we close this baby out?
No, ma'am. We covered everything that was on my list.
Alrighty. Listen, y'all, I had a list a mile long, but I do believe we have officially come to the end of our discussion and our talk of Sit in Chocolate by K.F. Breene. We are so glad that you joined us. Thank you so much. If you haven't done so already, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, leave a review wherever it is that you listen to this podcast. And if you have any recommendations for future stories, let us know in the comments. And if you have other questions, because we could have talked about this for a whole nother month. I think
we had plenty to talk about, and we just had to jam it all. The fact that we spent 4 weeks talking about these books, and we still are like, man, there was so much more we could have said, is a testament to the magic of writing, I think.
Oh yes, gotta love it. Now, as a reminder, y'all, I'm gonna set it up, and I'm gonna point to Rachel to bring us home on this particular thing, because I ain't gonna butcher this woman's name. Our next book selection is
The Woman in the Library by Sulari Gentle. For what it's worth, I literally went onto YouTube and looked for an interview with her where she said her own name so I could say it right. Like, I was like, okay, I gotta find it, just make sure. It's not like, it's not any like crazy spelling, but I didn't know, is it a soft G? Is it a hard G? Is it genteel? Gentle? Like, I went and I did all my research because I was like, I'm gonna get it right. So, by Sulari Gentle.
I'm gonna be doing this the whole month. Back to you, Rachel. Okay. So you have an opportunity to grab that book and read it and go along the process with us. You also have a whole catalog of other books that we have read and discussed, especially the ones that we mentioned in this episode. And so go ahead, make yourself comfortable. Go forward, go back, but stick around. So with that said, we appreciate you as always. And yeah, your girls are out. We'll talk to you soon. And as always, happy writing. Goodbye.